Well, guys, it's been a long time since we've done one of those. You saw from the title. We are going to do a full sharpening on this Norseman by John Grimsmo. So this is my friend Will's. He sent it in to me for sharpening. If you guys don't know, I do sharpen Norseman. It's the few knives that I still do take on a sharpening because I think they need to be sharpened properly. And you really can't send them back to John. John agrees. That's why John was recommending me to his US customers for sharpening for a long time. We're going to do a full top to bottom sharpening on this, but the first thing I got to do is flatten my stones. So we're going to talk about that from the tabletop. All right, guys, I have the garage door open, so you may hear a little bit of extra noise. I just want natural light, and I don't want to have it be hot in here. So I am going to flatten these stones. I probably will film most of it and then just speed it up. But the reason you flatten your stones is you want your stones flat. And some of these stones you can see are not 100% flat. The other reason is it takes off any weirdness to the stone and it opens up the abrasive. So I have fresh, clean abrasive. Some of these stones are older than others. It's going to take a little bit, so it definitely will be sped up. I will probably just put this on time lapse for you guys. But just a quick explanation of what we're going to do. We're going to put some abrasive down on the counter. This is the wrong abrasive. I just grabbed a couple of jars. This is aluminum oxide. I use that for my diamond stones, which we will not be using today because I do not have 1/2 inch diamond stones, and I'll explain that. But to do a radius or a recurve knife, you've got to have a smaller stone to get in at. We've explained that a few times, but I'm going to get everything set up. We'll put you guys on time lapse. I'm going to flatten these stones, and we will get back to it and get into sharpening this knife. So we are ready to start on this, and as you can see, Will uses this knife a lot. And I gotta say, the flattening, I only brought you in for a little bit because it's a very lengthy, very messy process. So Will uses this knife a lot. It's still sharp. I mean, it's toothy. I can tell he's probably been touching it up on something. But the unique thing about this knife is we have two distinct different grinds. We have got this forward convex edge that we're going to have to establish, and we have this flat recurve in this area here on this hollow. So we're going to start here and we're going to work our way up, but we want to marry these points together. So actually I'm going to start on the front so I can bring that material back, because the way you're going to see the way I hold this knife is kind of problematic. Now, I'm not actually holding the knife like this. I'm holding the knife more pinched. I'm not got my finger actually on the edge. I'm not actually touching it. I've got it pinched. So the pad of my finger and the area here are pinching that knife. But it's definitely not the safest way to hold it because I am using 1 inch and 1/2 inch stones. Now, I will recommend for your sharpening purposes that you put a little bit of water with a drop of soap in a pail to keep them in. It keeps the stones wet and it prevents them from getting too loaded. It breaks the surface tension and it doesn't let the metal load the stones. So I'm going to get started. We'll start on this 220 grit stone right here that did not need flattened, and we're going to go ahead and get going. And I'm going to do this forward edge on this. So I'll probably speed this up. You guys aren't going to see it real time, but just to start, we're going to do it. So the key to this is I've got to find the angle that this is at, and I have to reestablish, because it appears that somebody has sharpened this before Will bought it. It looks like they sharpened it on a fixtured system, and you can see there's a low spot there, and you can see that there are other spots on here where somebody was sharpening this and has established multiple facets. So I am going to have to just take my time and just reestablish that initial angle all the way up to the tip. But you got to work from side to side evenly, or you're not going to have this marriage point. What will happen is you'll get one side of this angle will be down further than the other. So you want to remove evenly from side to side. It's a time-consuming, very tedious process. So I'm going to go ahead and speed you guys up. And if I have something important to say, I'll bring you back in. But yeah, you can see there's definitely some weird facets on this knife that somebody established in the sharpening. So let's go ahead and speed it up from here on. All right, so I've gotten a lot of it fixed, but you can see that there's multiple facets on this. And that's because somebody sharpened this on a fixtured system. I've got it almost fixed on here, but the problem is I have to keep these two sides so that that marriage point is precise. So we're just gonna have to slowly take some material off here and then work our way back into this. That's the nice thing about hand sharpening. This is why I don't recommend fixtured systems. It's much harder to focus on specific areas. I can remove some material here and then work it in and even things out incrementally in smaller areas of this than I could if I was using a fixtured system. So guys, we have reached a point where I am ready to start sharpening this area here. I've brought this up to 400 grit. As you can see, like I said, there's a really low spot right here where whoever sharpened this put a facet on this point. I'm going to ask Will, the owner, if he wants me to take that out, because I'm going to have to remove a lot of material from side to side to do that, or if he just wants to leave it and in successive sharpenings, we will bring that back, because as I sharpen this in the future, I'm going to bring that angle back and I'm going to continue. Now, what I can do is, in the sharpening process, I can marry that in together. But now what I got to do is, I don't want to go any further on this because I've brought this point back further into this recurve than I want to. So I've got to remove this material on this side of the knife to get it back up and even it up to where it was. And then I'm going to work back and forth to the 1,000 grit mark, back and forth until I've got it married in. So give me a second to get a hold of the owner and I'll find out what he wants to do. So just spoke with Will, the owner, and so now we're going to work our way up. We're not going to try and take that lasso point out, because when I do the stropping and then polish the edge up, once I get all the way up through the grit, it's going to be a lot cleaner and consistent, and it's just an aesthetic thing. It's not going to affect. So now we've reestablished the proper grind on this knife, the way it was intended to be, and we're going to work on this area to bring this tip back up, sharpen this, and then we will work through the grit. So same thing, we're going to take this all the way up until we marry these points up the way we want, all the way up to 400 grit, and then we'll start working through the grit from front to back, just to make sure we even it. I'm going to speed you guys up so you don't have to watch the whole thing, but I will take you through the beginning. This is where it gets a little hairy, because this is a very narrow stone, so you've got to be really careful about how you do this. This is not the way most people would do this. This is just the way I've always sharpened. It's the easiest way for me. I don't like the fixtured systems. I find that the top-down view doesn't allow me to see where I'm coming off of the stone. So if I was doing this top-down on a fixture, I wouldn't really see where I'm at, and I would have that area where I'd slip and I would screw this up. And on an expensive knife like this, you want to try and maintain the original lines of that edge as much as you can. And I can do this. I've done this so many times, I can do this pretty much by feel. So as you can see, we're marrying that point up here. We got a nice clean transition. We've married up to that. We're just going to continue to do that from side to side until we've completely finished and fixed that edge. So I'm going to speed you guys up and I'll bring you back when we start transitioning through the grit. We'll bring it back to our regular speed. So now we're getting ready to work our way back through the grit. So there is a problem I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to have a hard time reestablishing like the sharp point that this had, because whoever sharpened this before rounded that all the way off. Let me show you in comparison to mine. Mine has a very predominant secondary point. This one is a little bit rounded. Now it'll get better. Let's focus. This one's a little bit more rounded. It'll get better as we progress through the sharpening, but it's never going to be as good as it was prior to somebody doing it incorrectly. And as you can see on this as well, see how mine has a deeper recurve? That's because someone sharpened the points off of this a little bit. This is a newer knife. Mine's older. They've changed the way they do it a little bit. But yeah, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to work our way into this. We're going to start with this 600 grit. We're going to work our way up, back down through these grits. And it's simply just refining the scratch pattern. So you can see I'm just taking off a little bit material. You can see the material's getting removed. And we're gonna just slowly work through this grit to refine the scratch pattern on this. Don't use any pressure. Just a little bit of light pressure. Just let the stone do its own work, and that's gonna allow you to maintain that angle a little bit easier. If you're pushing down, you have a tendency to allow it to run back and forth, and you can see we're getting a nice clean finish on that on the 600 grit. The final stone on this will be 1,000. We're gonna work both sides of this back and forth. We're gonna form a burr back and forth. So we're gonna form the burr, and then we're gonna flip it back and forth. I call it walking the burr. So I'm gonna walk that burr back and forth a few times before I do some burr removal. And that it fatigues the burr and allows you to break it off a lot easier. And it makes sure that you're getting into clean, unfatigued steel. So we're just going to make sure that we've worked that burr off, and then I'm going to feel for any inconsistencies. I'm going to look. Now you can see, like I said, there's a low spot or two on this. And I talked to the owner. You see that shiny spot right there? I talked to the owner. That's just an aesthetic thing. It's just the, that's just looks. It's not going to affect the way this knife cuts at all. It's from somebody improperly sharpening this knife prior. So we're just going to leave that. And at the end, I can kind of marry that in. That's one of the nice things about RWL 34 is I can marry that in with a strop and have it look much cleaner. It'll polish up nicely. So that is good. Now we're going to go to the 600 grit on the recurve section of the knife. So not only do I, at this point, do I want to work evenly from side to side, I want to work evenly from front to back to maintain where that secondary point is and have it come out as clean and as consistent as possible. Now, over future sharpenings, I can probably reestablish that point on that secondary point a little bit better. But to do it today would remove more material than we really want to. And considering it's still there, it's fairly consistent, we don't want to take off more material than we have to. So I'm wanting to look from side to side to make sure that it's in the same spot, make sure I've removed all the material up to, and I can see that there is still just a little spot right here that is not completely married up. And sometimes you will, it's not completely sharp at that very point. And sometimes you won't notice that until you start getting up through the grits and start marrying those points together. So I am doing this on aluminum oxide. I typically do RWL 34 on aluminum oxide. It's one of the steels that actually does really well on aluminum oxide. And mainly it's because I don't have diamond stones in the 1/2 inch range. They are unusual to be able to find the ones I like in a 1/2 inch size. So formed the burr the whole way. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple burr removing strokes. And then I want to look at it and see if I'm happy with my angles. And I'm not. I still am going to have to go back in grit a little bit and bring this front piece. I might be able to do it on this stone. Let's see. I might be able to bring that front point down ever so slightly. This is not a very aggressive stone. Might not allow me to do what I want. Just going to try and take a little bit more material off at that very, very end. And that is the problem with Tontos. Sometimes they get a flat spot at the very front of them. And then that's the part that's going to get dull the fastest. And there's no real way to just sharpen that point. You pretty much just have to resharpen the whole blade just to sharpen that one spot. And that is one of the main reasons I'm not such a fan of this style of a Tonto, like an Americanized Tonto or a recurve Tonto. They have a tendency to just get dull at that very point right here at the marriage point. I think, though, that we've removed enough material. Let me just make sure. Nope. I'm gonna have to speed you guys up because I have to go back a step in the stones. Well, I'll try not to shake you guys too much, but I fixed the issue that I kept seeing. There was a little spot that just wasn't sharp. I've married that angle up from side to side. You can see it's exactly the same on either side. I'm going to finish up just doing a couple little things, but what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and move up in grit to 600. We're going to touch this up. We're going to knock off all those little facets. Now, this is getting a full convex on this front, which means that you guys really can't see it, but my angle changes as I'm progressing. So each pass, each time that you see that forward and then back, I've changed the angle ever so slightly. And what I'm basically doing is I'm starting and you'll see some facets and then slowly they just all go away and you wind up with just one consistent radius where I've knocked all those shoulders off by changing that angle so many times. But I'm not taking it up and hitting the very apex of the edge on the stone and knocking off my apex. I'm just coming up to the apex and then working my way back. So that was our 600 on that. I'm happy with that. It stayed nice and consistent. I don't feel any unusualness on that. All right, we're gonna go ahead and do 600 on the inner part. So the more you go up in grit, the less material actually removing. So at this point, it might get dark on the stone. We're not removing much material. You still can do some minor profiling on the 600 grit like I did. I didn't want to take off too much material just to fix one little spot. So I only went back down to 400 grit instead of going all the way back down to the 220 grit that we used to set the angle and remove the old scratch pattern, the original edge, and correct those issues and do the reprofiling. You can do some minor edge adjustment if it's not horrible with a 400 grit. Now, once you start getting into 600, you're really not going to do anything to adjust the actual angle at edge. You're just changing the scratch pattern. So that's why I only went down one stone instead of going back up to the 220. It would have been faster if I'd done the 220, but you run much more risk of damaging the work you've already done if you have a little bit of a hiccup. It's a lot easier to fix anything you might do with a 400 grit stone than it is to try and fix it if you went all the way down to 220 or even lower, like 100 grit. You definitely can, if you get your angle off a little bit, you can definitely screw your edge up. So we've walked through that edge progression there. I'm going to nail a quick burr removal pass all the way up to the point on that secondary. Do that on either side. That is so sharp and aggressive at 600 grit. I have been known to, when I sharpen my Norseman, to just leave it at 600 grit. It's a very aggressive edge, but we will not be doing that. We're going to go ahead, go up to 1,000 grit, and then walk through the strop. So 1,000 grit is going to be my final grit on this. I don't have any stones that I could use to take this past 1,000 grit. And I'll tell you what, 1,000 grit on RWL 34 is a very, very good usable edge, but it is gorgeous once you hit it on a strop and then polish. So it doesn't take a lot to sharpen RWL 34 cleanly. It does a very, very good job, especially on these aluminum oxide stones. But like I said, no pressure on this, because one of two things. One, you can push too hard and then you screw up your angle. Two, all you're doing is you're just basically wearing your stones out prematurely. It's not going to make them cut any faster. All you're going to do is cut deep grooves in your stones. So now we're all the way up through the grit. Do a couple more burr removal passes on this. And RWL 34 deburrs really, really easily. Make sure I've got that the way I want it. You're going to see some little spots. I still have got a little bit of some facets, residual facets from the sharpening process on the other side that we want to just even out and make consistent. And like I said, this is where we're going to try and marry in that shiny spot on this. You can see now we've got all those facets removed. We got just that one little shiny spot right there. When I start to strop this, we're going to remove that completely with the strops. Just a couple little final passes on that. I'm happy with where all my angles meet. Little spot where there was a facet at the very, very front that I saw glint. Because now I'm just marrying in some of the inconsistencies from the way it was sharpened previously. There's just some little things that whoever sharpened it previously kind of did that screwed up the way the edge looks. Now I'm just working my way back into getting that aesthetics on this, because this is an expensive knife. You want it to look good, not just perform good. There are things you can do aesthetically for a knife. So go ahead and we'll do the 1,000 grit on the inside, and then we'll do the stropping. So like I said, RWL 35, you can, or RWL 34, I mean, you can see how easily it cuts on these stones. It's just really easy to walk it through the grits. If this had been in any other steel, we would have taken much, much longer to transition through, set the angle and everything. And it's not that it's soft. It's not that RWL 34 is soft, because it holds an edge very well for a relatively long time for a steel that's so easy, so easy to sharpen. It's one of my favorite steels to sharpen because it gets ridiculously sharp, so easy, and it stays that way for a while. It responds to a strop really well. Just a couple of burr removal strokes. Make sure I've got it the way I want it. It looks good. There's no inconsistencies in it. I'll wipe that down, and I'm going to get my strops. So hang on a second, I'm going to clear all this out and I'm going to get my strops out. So when I said strops, I should have been more accurate and said strop. I'm only going to use this one. This is my leather paddle strop, and it's been loaded. And all I'm doing is I'm just trying to, right now, I'm trying to marry in some of those spots that we saw from the previous sharpening. I'm not actually stropping the edge. I'm using chromium oxide to marry in the area behind that into it, and then I'm going to strop up the other side on the diamond, the actual edge itself. So like I said, the nice thing about RWL34, you can see how easily it has polished up, and all I'm doing is any remnant of those previous facets that were on there, I'm just kind of marrying them into everything else. And then we'll flip over here and do the same thing on the interior. And we're going to flip to this side of the strop that's loaded with the diamond. I don't like using the chromium oxide on the actual edge because it has a tendency to give you more of a burnished edge than what you would have, but you can see how you're marrying those in. Hang on a second, I'm getting a phone about that. That was the owner. So what I was saying was, you can marry those in, and so what I'm going to do now is, now that I've got those points, that front pretty much gotten rid of those little facets and those weird hiccups that were in the original sharpening. I'll move over here to the side that's loaded with diamond so that I don't burnish off my edge. And I'm just gonna slowly strop that edge just to give it a final cleaning up and just make sure that I've 100% removed any of the burr. And then the nice thing about this paddle strop is it's rounded. I can do the recurve area in here nice and clean and just bring that up. And then do a quick sharpness test, just quick paper cut test, and see how it does. But I'm going to tell you right now, I can tell you by feeling it, it is aggressively sharp. Let me just give it a couple more passes on this side just to get rid of any additional some little spots on here that are still like little fake facets from the original sharpening. Just want it to be not just sharp, but sharp and pretty. And the stropping is done, ladies and gentlemen. Let me get a piece of newspaper and we'll test this. Newspaper is my preferred medium to test a knife on because it is, it's very thin, it's very light, and it's going to tell you really easily whether you've got that knife sharp. You can see we've got that tip on that. Really sharp. So there you go. Let's turn this around. Let's take a look at Will's knife. Will's knife is beautiful. I am a big fan of the reverse honeycomb. I definitely like my reverse honeycomb better, but this is an attractive pattern, and the fact is this will be easier to hide scratches than some of the other patterns. This is a beautiful, beautiful knife. Difference between mine and Will's has got a steel lock bar insert and mine does not. There's a different sound, and that's why, if any of you were curious why I chose one without, they just feel and sound a little different. So at any rate, let's turn this around and do some final thoughts.
There you go, guys. That's a lot of fun. I do like sharpening the Norseman. Not so much I enjoy the sharpening part. I enjoy seeing that big change from a dull knife back to a sharp knife. And these things get so sharp. So not going to make this any longer. You know, there's a lot of ways to support. I have sponsors. Their links are down below. There's discounts built into them. I have coupon codes at FerrumForgedKnifeWorks.com and at Rose Craft Blades. That coupon code is crazy sharp, all one word. I have got an affiliate link for KATSU knives. I'll start throwing that into some of these videos. I've got an Amazon store. It's all available to you there down below. Take that link, pin it to your browser. It doesn't cost you anything at checkout. And I have a multi-tier membership that gets a lot of people a lot of benefits. So guys, that's it. There may be an extended version of this for the paying members. It depends on whether I can edit out the audio. I was watching a movie while I was doing it. It's probably going to get copyrighted if I do. We'll see what I can do with the audio, but I definitely was watching Dread, and it will probably get copyright struck because there's music. So that's it, guys. I love you all. Keep it clean in the comment section. If it's your birthday, happy birthday. And I'll see you in the next video.